Hello, I'm Chuck Spitler, and I have the honor to tell you the history of Koroneburg. And it's actually going to be two parts. One's going to be factual history in how what you see in our village and our where we're at, why we're at, that's going to be explained. But then part two is going to be told by my friend Baron Heinrich von Lauffer, kind of the legendary history. I always say the history of Koroneburg. He'll be telling you his backstory, and it's something you all should know, so that if someone asks you a question about, well, how did the Baron become the Baron, and you'll know. But first, let's begin with the actual history of Koroneburg, and so here's the sequence of events which I'm recording this in 2020, so this is our 23rd year. We've been going 23 years. I've been honored to be the Baron every one of those 23 years. It's been a super privilege, and but it all started, I guess you could say, as a dream of our founder, Mr. Tom Wilson. Tom had done a lot of Renaissance events. He participated in the big Renaissance pleasure fair, and he had done his own events in places like Indio and Orange County, but never a permanent fair, and never one that would last many weekends in a row. And he finally, in the late 90s, it came together for Tom that he started his own festival at a very nice site. So Tom was well known in the Renaissance circles. He was the publisher of the Renaissance Herald. It was a periodical that would come out about the Renaissance world in Southern California. And as I said, Tom and his partner Patty had come up with this desire. We want to have our own festival. And it began here. I'm going to put out a challenge. I think Koroneburg has a unique aspect in several ways. And I would put the challenge out to any other festival in the world. Have you been on the same location with the same head figure, be it Baron, King, Queen, Viceroy, whatever, same guy, head guy, which is me? Can any other festival say they've been at the same place with the same head character for 23 years? No. Maybe, but I doubt it. So, like I say, in the late 90s, Tom and Patty went for it. And Tom had been a printer, I think, with the county of Riverside. And he learned of I guess for lack of a better term, a defunct park called Prado River Basin Park, that he looked into leasing on a long-term lease. It had been a park at one time, with trails and nature centers and an amphitheater and all that, but I assumed because of budget cuts, was closed, and had been closed for a long time. In fact, when Tom came along to look at the place, and our wondrous legendary photographer Fernie Espinosa was along that took video of the place. It was a mess. All the electrical wiring had been torn up. The copper pipes were gone. Anything that could be ripped off was gone, and anything that could be painted with obscene graffiti was painted. And not a pretty place. Very few trees, lots of earwigs, but Tom saw its potential, and then gathered a group around him of people that he'd known from other Renaissance festivals. And they began planning what was then at first called, it was a mouthful, the Crossroads Old World European Renaissance Festival. That was the original name. So that everything came together, and the first festival, which was to become Koroneburg, began in the spring of 1998. And that's where I came along. they knew two things. It was going to be German-themed festival, which is different. Most of the Renaissance events around the country are English-themed, specifically Elizabethan England. But ours was going to be different. It's going to be based on the continent of Europe in what would become Germany someday. This is pre-Germany. And we were going to be along the Rhine River, which is over there. It's actually the Santa Ana River, except for 5 weeks in the spring when we call it the Rhine River. And I was, Tom and Patty saw me doing the Dickens Festival in Riverside, and somehow knew that I was their Baron, and I'm very glad they picked me. I'll always be grateful. So let's see here. I don't want to miss anything. Oh, the only thing handed to me that his name would be Baron von Lauffer. And he would be a brewer, a great brewer of wine beer. And that was the little seeds that were given to me when we started. If any of you know the late, great Dave Gocher, he was a great storyteller. And I'm told that driving back from Las Vegas Festival, Tom and Patty in the front seat and Dave in the back seat, that's when the idea that it would be a German Baron and a brewer, and his name would be Heinrich von Lauffer. That's where that seed was planted. And that's what I said, the mouthful. The Crossroads Old World European Renaissance Festival, the first one held in this same area where we are now in 1998. I guess in my case, right place at the right time. It's true. I had never been to a Renaissance festival, I must admit, except I did stop by the Palm Springs Renaissance Festival that March, supposedly to meet a costumer, and that never came to fruition, but I did sort of see a Renaissance festival. But really, the first day of Koroneburg was my first day ever at a festival in 1998. Probably the only incidents where the head character of the festival is a fair virgin on the day of the opening of the festival. So how did the backstory, which is going to be in the second part of this introduction, how did that start? Well, we were getting together. Let's write a paragraph about our character, who we are. This was for our second season. Let's get to know each other. We'll have a key group of people. And we were all to write a paragraph about our characters. Well, I got started and mine ended up going on for 14 pages and called Heinrich's Journey. And that's where the whole thing about, which you're going to hear that in the second half, so I won't get into that. The legendary backstory of our festival, which you should know in case somebody asks you. So it started out with sticks and pop-ups and very few trees, but eventually you can see what we have today. A very beautiful village, one of the few permanent Renaissance villages in the West. There are several. There's, some in Arizona, some in Texas, but not so much in California. We might be the only permanent Renaissance village in California, certainly in Southern California. And like a true village would be through the centuries, buildings have come and gone. Lots of people have come and gone. Sadly, in our 18th season, Tom Wilson was in the hospital when the season began, but we always thought he'd get out and come and visit us. Well, unfortunately, after our opening day of season 18, Tom passed away. We lost him. And then 4 days later, we lost Charlie Allen, who was, basically this village was built on three pillars. And that's Tom Wilson, Patty Long, and Charlie Allen. And we lost two of those pillars within 4 days. But we weren't sure if we were going to make it, frankly. It was touch and go. And I've said this many times. I'm not ashamed to say it. It was by God's grace that we were purchased by a wonderful partnership they'd known of the land because they would come here for LARP activities. We love our LARPers. And just an amazing story that we survived this far. And of course, we had a challenge in 2020 with the entire world being shut down by the COVID-19 virus. So we'll be there virtually, and we'll be there for many, many, many years to come. People ask me, Chuck, how long are you going to be the Baron? And my answer always is, as long as I can. It's been my privilege to tell you this portion of the Koroneburg history. There's a lot more to it, a lot more people I should have mentioned. I mentioned Fernie, who's been there photographing and videoing everything. So I am going to turn over this screen now to the Baron, who will tell you the legendary side of the history of Koroneburg. Well, that was a very interesting story that Chuck told, but there's more to it. I'm about to tell you the other history of Koroneburg. You might call it the legend. In fact, I want to talk to you about it because you're going to know how I, a humble son of a Krugmacher from Switzerland, became the Baron of Koroneburg. You see, my father, as I mentioned, was a Krugmacher. He made krugs, drinking vessels. And if I may give you a little lesson here, a stein is made out of stoneware. A krug is made out of metal. Both of them very useful for drinking out of. Here's to your health. But my father was a Krugmacher. We were from a little village up in the Alps, a little village called Benwil. And every winter we would work along. We would help our father make these krugs. And we would, batten down for the winter. And then every spring, we would start down the Rhine and sell our wares along the way. Well, we came to an area kind of near where France is across the river. And my father needed to build a fire, to melt some metals. So he sent my brother and I out to the woods for firewood. I should mention my family was Clement, and my mother was Marta, and I had 2 sisters and a brother. My brother was Hansel, and my sisters Katrine and Martha Rose. Well, Hansel and I were out in the woods looking for firewood, and the rest of the family was in the wagon. And what happened was a very big clap of thunder came and scared the horses, and the wagon rushed into the woods and went away. And as it was going down into the woods, a little box kind of bounced out of the back. So my brother and I came back to try to find the family and maybe get shelter in the wagon, and they were gone. And the only thing left in our campsite was this little box, a little wooden box. So I held on to that, and we didn't know what to do. We were all alone along the Rhine River. We were on the banks of the Rhine. And so we started walking down the road, and we felt very lonely. And along came this little old lady. She called herself a traveler or a Romani. And she took pity on us, I guess you could say. She took us into her wagon. She had this beautiful gypsy wagon. And she took us in and fed us and kept us warm for years. We called her Mama. We'd always hoped to be reunited with our own mother, but we never saw them again. But she taught us, this old, kindly old lady, taught us how to read, how to do amazing things. And one day I was cleaning that box. I cherished that. I was cleaning it, and I see that the bottom was loose. And I lifted up the lid or the piece of wood at the bottom, and under that box, false bottom, was a recipe. It was a recipe written in my grandmother's hand on how to make beer. And so, we tried it out. My brother and I got all the stuff together, and we mixed up some of this beer, and it turned out to be pretty good, if I do say so myself. And word sort of spread, through the friends and relatives of our mama, and soon the words traveled to the emperor's palace in Vienna of this ale, this good beer made by this peasant boy on the banks of the Rhine in a little shack. And quite to everyone's surprise, one day, years later, the emperor himself showed up at our little lean-to, and he wanted to taste the beer for himself. And he thought it was the best beer he'd ever tasted. I was getting pretty good at making it by then. And he thought about it for a moment, and this is where it all changed. My fate and your fate. Because at that moment, he declared, I remember his words specifically, as long as the Rhine flows to the sea, and as long as this beer flows to my palace, you are the the baron of this land. I almost gave myself a promotion there. And the emperor said to me that I would be baron of this land. And what luck for the son of a Krugmacher from Switzerland to now have this beautiful lands along the Rhine. He didn't name it, but I came up with the name for the place, called it Koroneburg, because Corona, of course, means crown, and it was in honor of the emperor's crown. So we had this practically empty place except for the trees and the Rhine River and the hills, but it was the barony of Koroneburg, and I, the first baron of the land. And life there could be very pleasant, and especially with the profits from the sales of the beer. I built myself a little castle, and some people came to live there with us. We had all kinds of shopkeepers and merchants, and soon my brother and I, who really had no family, suddenly we had a huge family, the family of Koroneburg. And more people came, more every year. I decided to thank the emperor, in addition to naming the village after his crown. Every spring, I was going to declare a festival. A festival, first of all, that we had survived another winter, and then also to thank God for my great fortune, my great turn of fortune. And so every spring we have had one, a beautiful festival that would go on for 5 or 6 weeks, and we'd have the greatest cooks from all over the land, the greatest merchants, making great jewelry and clothing and shoes and even armory and swords and wonderful baked goods and candies and all kinds of wine and mead. And of course, I would make special beers for the occasion. Every time I say that, I get thirsty. Oh, here's an interesting thing. My brother, Hansel, took to the sea. The emperor had given us a ship, and frankly, I get seasick when I'm out at the water. So I gave the ship to my brother, and he has sailed the world, sailing in the name of Koroneburg. And I have met many fine people. He has told them about me and our beautiful village, and so in the spring, they come from all over the world. And as a matter of fact, I wrote a song about that. It's a song that we sing a lot in the streets of it. It's called Koroneburg. I'll sing it. There's like 1,000 verses, but I'll sing you 1 or 2. I am your baron. I rule around here. because the emperor liked this good beer. He liked it so much that he gave me this place, and that should explain this big smile on my face. Koroneburg, Koroneburg, we are all family here. Koroneburg, Koroneburg, so kiss me and have one more beer. Oh, we have so many verses. We'll sing them together someday. You come and see me. But we have this festival every spring. And I'm speaking to you now in the midst of our 23rd festival. I've been the Baron since day one, and I love my family in Koroneburg, and we love you, and we want you to come and see us. So for now, until we meet again, that's the story of Koroneburg, how I became the Baron, why it's named Koroneburg, and our good fortune here to be so blessed and to be such a great family. And you're a part of that family too. We'll see you at Koroneburg. For now, this is Baron von Lauffer saying Auf Wiedersehen.